Hi, everyone. I'm Flavia Salles, Head of Marketing here at Finboot. Welcome, everyone, to join us in this official partner event of the European Green Week 2006. So today I'll be the moderator of today's session, Investing Nature Through Transparency in Industrial Value Chains, using digital traceability from soil restoration to circular products. And I am very pleased to be here today with some amazing guests. This event obviously is hosted by Finboot, and I have here my colleague Juan, also Acelen Renewables with Pedro Estrella and Harry Marshall from our partner OpenAtlas. So I will bring them all to screen now so that you can meet them. Tech issues, just a moment. Now, live stream is always like this. Hi, everyone. Hi, guys. So thank you for joining me today on this live session. We're going to discuss some interesting points around how to align sustainability and value industrial chains. All right. So the agenda today, it's basically we're going to have a panel with some questions to the speakers, and then we will have the Q&A session to the who is watching us can pop up their comments and questions on the comment section, and we are going to read them at this moment. Okay, so. Before jumping in on the question itself, I want to present the speakers today. Well, also they can present themselves. So the first one I want to invite to speak up is Juan from Finboot, the CEO. Juan, would you mind to just very briefly speak about what Finboot is and your roles and what you main points that we're bringing to the table today?
Definitely. No, thank you, Flavia. As you said, my name is Juan. I'm the CEO and I'm one of the founders at Finboot. Finboot is a digital traceability company that focuses on helping capital-intensive and hard-to-abate organizations bring more transparency to the supply chain, to their supply chain, particularly around some of the renewable, circular, or low-carbon products that they are introducing and scaling in the market, and make sure that they have the capability to capture the data and the evidence that demonstrates those sustainability credentials, right, of those products. And at times we certainly do that with a regulatory lens inside, but actually in today's conversation, what we want to perhaps prioritize or amplify the most is the industrial competitiveness element that has, right? So this event, as you know, is part of the EU Green Week. Most of the conversation and most of the discussions around the EU Green Week typically go around reporting, compliance, sustainability targets. Today, and in this session in particular, we want to kind of shift that a little bit and talk about, hey, what's the overall business opportunity behind investing in nature, right? And that's one of the reasons, again, we have two excellent panelists that have very good examples of how that is possible to achieve and possible to deploy. So very happy to be here with you today and joined again by such an incredible group to have this conversation.
Thank you, Juan, for this introduction. So I invite now Pedro from Acelen to do the same. Pedro, be my guest.
Thank you very much, Flavia. Good morning, good afternoon for those ones that are watching us on that live stream. So my name is Pedro Estrella. I'm the Vice President of New Business and Digital at Acelen Renewables. And what is Acelen Renewables? Acelen Renewables, it is a Brazilian company with investment from the Emirates. that we will produce HVO, advanced biofuels, HVO and SAF at large scale. We have just announced 2 weeks ago the final investment decision to build a 20,000 barrels per day, half a plant capacity here in Brazil. And our project is not only to produce the industrial facility and process vegetable oils to produce advanced biofuels, but we have one of a kind integrated solution and integrated business with feedstock and the industrial part. So we are developing this novel feedstock here in Brazil called macaoba, with a lot of potential. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, and happy to be here in this panel with Juan and Harry. Both of them have been partners on that journey and helping us to really achieve that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro. And last but not least, Harry, your turn.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me, Flavia, Juan, Pedro, and everyone in the audience. My name's Harry Marshall. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OpenAtlas, and we are a geospatial remote sensing company, which is always a little bit of a mouthful. But basically what that means is we use satellite imagery and various different machine learning models to identify different phenomena in supply chains for large businesses, enterprise businesses who operate in Europe, but also, of course, a lot of what Europe consumes begins its journey far out in the world in other aspects and geographies around the world as well. So what we do is we help businesses better understand their supply chains by identifying different phenomena like deforestation in supply chains, climatic risk exposure as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I think is super relevant for today's panel. Really keen to get into it. I know Pedro and Juan have a lot of very valuable stuff to say, so I'm excited to hear about them and to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at OpenAtlas as well, and how there's this link that is, I think, still increasing today, despite what some of the headwinds we may experience on a sort of political level in some aspects of the world. I think there's still a strong push that I experience in businesses who realize that investing in nature and sustainability, if it is that, in their supply chains and their businesses has a positive return on investment for their operations as well. And I think that's kind of crucially a bit of what we'll be chatting about today, and excited to tell you about how we facilitate that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I think you just said that right. Basically, for those that are just joining us today, you are in an official event of the European Green Week. Just let us know on the comments where you are joining us from. But here today, we're going to explore basically how investing in nature, that is the European Green Week team, can create real economic value. Both, most of you just said about the business competitiveness. We're also going to talk about how to support this energy transition, but in strengthening this industrial competitiveness, right? Basically helping companies be more transparent and having more resilient value chains. So we are going to talk about different topics: sustainable aviation fuels, rain restoration, also sustainability data, digital traceability, and the whole role of transparency in the global markets. So if you have any questions related to that, feel free to point it out on the comments, and we are going to take a look at them on the Q&A session that we have more at the end of this session. Okay, so Juan, I need to start with you as always. I know that we have here, for those that doesn't know, Juan have his own web series. It's called Green Supply Chain Insights, and you can see in his profile on LinkedIn. And you are always talking about, your discussions with other leaders across energy, manufacturing, and overall sustainability, and also about supply chain transformation. And I think one thing that always coming up once and again is that sustainability is not longer just reporting exercise, right? You mentioned before in your introduction about competitiveness. So I would like to know from you, from that conversation that you have had, what has changed in the way that organizations think about nature and sustainability today?
Yeah, no, thank you, Flavia. And yeah, again, so through Green Supply Chain Insights, you have there a compilation of videos that are a bit of a mix, because some of it is a lot of interviews and conversations with industry leaders, but some of it is also just kind of my own thoughts and my viewpoint in what's going on, let's say, in this industrial decarbonization journey. And I fully align with you, Flavia. One of the kind of most recurrent themes is the fact that sustainability is no longer an isolated part of the organization, right? You used to see it as a kind of reporting exercise, responsibility, and almost like a pain, right? Something that organizations were doing to tick a box, but it was not part of the core business, right? And more what we're seeing is that's moving towards the resilience and the competitiveness of any business, particularly those in capital intensive and hard to abate sectors, right?
Yeah.
Because if we see, these are sectors that have kind of sensed or have seen a significant change from the last century into this one. Last century, we were all kind of operating under an assumption of abundance in nature, right? So land was abundant, feedstocks were abundant, and it was all about, let's just exploit this for growth, right? Clearly, that's an assumption or a scenario that is no longer true, that it no longer holds. And again, more than enough scientific evidence to prove that. But at this stage, it's just the power of observation can give us that realization, right? So
the experience.
Exactly. The amounts of climate volatility, disruptions, resource constraints, of course, geopolitical climate as well is not kind of helping that equation. All of that has made it so that nature now moves from the background of the business into a core area, right? And then all of these elements on sustainability and what we do around our sustainability strategy, sustainability investments in nature, as we say, all of that today now influences how we're going to access the market, how we're going to have a security in our supply chain, how we're going to be trusted by our customers, how we're going to be trusted, again, by our financial backers as well, so that the capital allocation more and more takes a link to sustainability elements as well. So I think that's kind of the core part of if we have a great example today that I know we're going to touch on next, but if we have one takeaway message from this conversation, is the fact that, again, it's understanding how investing in nature becomes a competitive advantage and it becomes a business opportunity, right? So we should stop looking at this as a responsibility or regulatory burden, and we should more actively and progressively see it for the value and the potential return on investments that we could have, right? I think that's why projects like what Acelen Renewables is doing is so interesting and is so valuable. It's essentially demonstrating how we can, go and restore this degraded land, but at the same time build that fully vertical integrated process that Pedro was talking about, where we go to an industrial scale renewable fuel ecosystem, and it just has an impact, right? All of that good and both environmentally and social elements that we're doing upstream of the value chain, we're doing because of those benefits, of course, but also because of the business opportunity that it represents and the return on investment that can give us, so that more investment into nature can be deployed.
Definitely, I totally agree. And I don't know if the other guests want to say something around that, complement what Juan said.
I'm always happy to compliment whatever Juan has to say, to be honest. Yeah, honestly, I just think it's incredibly true of the moment, like also in our business. So we work with a lot of supply chains in large organizations. And this is, supply chains they have a number of different stakeholders. You have sustainability teams, compliance teams to make sure you're buying the right stuff, risk teams, but also procurement teams and stuff like this. And I think what we're finding as we operate, we help businesses identify climatic risk in their supply chains with the folks at Finboot, is that what used to be siloed different parts of an organization, maybe sustainability was over here, maybe legal was over here, and procurement was somewhere else. They all seem to be coming together and thinking about this not as independent initiatives, but as a holistic approach to say, how can we come together and, improve our impact on the nature that we interact with as a business, but also on the bottom line of our business, and also in other cases, just the pure business continuity. How do we make sure that we have enough supply such that we can continue producing what we need to produce tomorrow? So yeah, I definitely am happy to compliment Juan's position there, because we really see it, and I'm sure everyone on in the seminar would see it in real time as well, increasingly.
Definitely. Thanks, Harry. Pedro, do you want to add anything about this?
Well, just a quick comment here, and definitely I would like to build on that from a technology and execution perspective. At Acelen Renewables, we are seeing exactly what they said. Like, the nature is no longer a nice to have, like that reporting area, sustainability associated reports and things like that. So it's really becoming a core aspect for industrial competitiveness. And I think like the key enabler that shift is data, digitalization, and AI, and solutions like my colleagues here are providing to the market. Let me give you a concrete example. We are developing that integrated platform that combines macaúba cultivation on degraded pasture land with renewable fuel production to manage and really select the lands that will plant 150,000 hectares of macaúba with full traceability from soil restoration to the last point of the value chain, the final drop of SAF. You simply cannot operate that without advanced digital tools. Digital tools should really like get the trust of investors, regulators, and consumers that we are really doing the right thing, and tools such as the tools from OpenAtlas to really select the lands that complies with the regulations and sustainability criteria from the start. So really for me, like the shift is on digital data and AI that enable that transformation from sustainability to really industrial competitiveness.
That's really nice. I think building on that idea as well, and I see that what makes the Acelen project so attractive is exactly that, because you can combine this renewable fuel production with large-scale restoration of degraded lands, and this obviously brings a lot of benefits, not only tangible benefits, environmental benefits, of course, but there's also more broader economic opportunities behind these initiatives, and I would like to touch on them. So how do you see that investing in nature, using Acelen as an example, maybe can create this tangible economic results, of course, but also social and industrial value, both for the company, right, but for the communities around your facilities? And would you mind to just dive in on this to explore?
Do we have half an hour? No, I'm just kidding. We are passionate about of what we are doing. That's a really great question, and it really gets to the heart of what makes our project unique. So most people, and in the past, like most people, I think everybody understands that restoring degraded land is good for the environment. But I think the shift and what many don't realize is that degraded land is actually a massive untapped economic asset, especially in Brazil, but in many regions in the world. So talking about specifically about the reality that we are in here at Acelen Renewables, Brazil has around 100 million hectares of degraded pasture land. It's roughly 2 Germans. So these are areas that in the past were economically unproductive. And really our approach is to transform those areas in productive landscapes and areas through Macaúba. This plant, and we love to talk about Macaúba, it really has the power to thrive and restore degraded soils, requires no deforestation, and really doesn't compete with food production. So let me give you some examples. You said about how big is the value creation on that. So in the environmental value, the 150,000 hectares of Macaúba will be capturing around 60 million tons of CO2 during the life cycle of the project. That's roughly, I was trying to get some numbers, that's roughly around the equivalent of taking the emissions out of the 13 million cars off the road per year. Roughly like the fleet of a big city in any place in the world. So environmental value, economic value. We have been doing some studies with the most respected economic research institutes in Brazil. FGV is one of them, and the potential is on the investment of our project will inject direct and indirectly in the economy $40 billion into the Brazilian economy. So economic value, social value, like typically those areas, not only in Brazil, but around the world with degraded land are areas with low economical activity. So by investing on those areas, you bring opportunities, investment, create jobs, and in fact, we'll be creating around 85,000 direct and indirect jobs. And not only that, but we are committed to dedicate around 20% of our Macaúba cultivation areas to partnerships with family farmers, smallholders on those regions, and local producers. So again, this is not charity; it's strategy to build resilient and inclusive supply chain that brings those populations, and also the industrial value, which is the production of the SAF. So just to finalize here, I think this kind of investment, and again, shows how sustainability doesn't need to be a cost, but it can be a business with its proper business case and business value. And I call it a triple dividend investment. It brings returns for investors, for the nation, and for the communities. And we really believe this model, and that's what we believe that project is so unique.
Yes, I agree. It's not about improving the value chains that we already have. It's creating new ones entirely, right? It's thinking smarter, but also sustainable, right? I mean, it's bring that perspective that sustainability and economic development, they are not competing with each other, right? So it's really interesting. I don't know if Juan or Harry, do you want to point out something to add any relevant comment in here?
If anything, I kind of just want to highlight some of the points that Pedro made, right? That is what I think makes, again, that combination so powerful, right? It's the fact that, again, Acelen is looking at restoring economic activity in areas of Brazil that, again, used to have pasture land, that used to have an economic activity that was no longer viable, and that it become this degraded, somewhat almost to an extent abandoned land. And correct me if I'm wrong, Pedro, but it's again, all of these communities then were very much struggling, right? And what we're given here is an opportunity to say, hey, no, actually, here's an opportunity to reactivate the economic systems of these communities with something that has a global impact, right? With something that, as you move along the value chain, it starts creating all of those levels of value that then puts Acelen Renewables in a very competitive position to fill a significant and growing demand for renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuels that through mandates, not just in Brazil, in Europe, in North America, like there's a need for these products to be placed in the market. There's certainly not enough of them now. And by being able to do this in a way that is not just competitive, but it also carries with this environmental and this social value, I think it just brings together a story that again, I feel it close to what we do, and I'm so pleased to be one of the tools that you guys are leveraging to bring this to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, I'm struck by this expression that we have in Australia. I'm sure everyone has it in the rest of the world as well. But that idea of like one man's trash is another man's treasure, sort of thing, right? And this idea that this degraded land is less degraded and just not yet restored land, in one sense or another, and like restored, to economically viable systems. I think that's fantastic. And I think it is, I think on a lot of respects, these sorts of projects are enabled today because there's both like a motivation to do it. I think there's like space within economies and ecosystems to do this, especially degraded ones. And also crucially, as you were saying, Pedro, the technology exists, which is enabling that motivation from different stakeholders to be actualized into actual projects and such like that. So it really is, I think, a confluence of a lot of different things occurring at the same time. And I think the trajectory, not just for your projects, but more globally as well, I think is positive. And I think we've got to hold on to that at this time.
Yeah, definitely. I think this naturally raised questions around scalability, right?
Yeah.
And this problem is not, as Pedro mentioned, it's not only in Brazil or Latin America. We are here from Europe talking about Juan and I right now, and this is also one big issue here. Especially due the history of Europe, there's a lot of degraded land here as well. So definitely something that can be explored worldwide. And regarding that, Pedro, I remember seeing one of your interviews to CNN another day. You talk about how Europe has, already moved from SAF ambition to SAF mandates. And Brazil is preparing its own regulatory frameworks and trying to position itself within this global renewable fuels market. So, and at the same time, I think we are seeing increasing discussion around energy security, industrial competitiveness. We've mentioned this a few times. And why not also, I would like to add international cooperation, especially nowadays. So I'm Brazilian, you are Brazilian. So I would like to understand, how do you see this collaboration with Europe and Brazil, or basically Latin America, because we have seen that after 20 years of negotiation, there's a agree with European and Mercosur markets. So I would like to just to hear your thoughts on that. And of course, and maybe the other guys can also give their views on with other markets the impact of this agreement worldwide. So, Pedro, please, what do you think?
No, absolutely, and let me just start with some context before. So definitely, Europe has moved decisively and really has moved the industry in that sense. So the ReFuelEU aviation regulation mandates that 2% of the aviation fuel must be SAF by 2025, and there is a ramp up until 2050 with roughly 70%. It created a whole movement in the world. So you have UK with setting similar mandate, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, they are all following. So I think one key message that I would like to start is it's no longer an idea, a voluntary market, but it is a reality, a regulatory reality, and Europe has been this decisive player on that, pushing that agenda. So Brazil here locally now it is designing its own framework. The future law that was passed a couple of years ago creates the mandates for SAF blending starting 2027. And again, that is a consequence, and I see that as a consequence of this important move that Europe has made and has influenced the whole world. And really, Brazil has this unique position on that overall market.
Yeah.
So Brazil has unmatched agriculture scale, abundant water resource. We have the solar irradiation needed, the clean energy matrix. So no other country combines all those factors at scale. So second,
and friendly people, Pedro. Brazil has as well, right?
Yes.
And hopefully the next
young people.
Young people and the next World Cup. There you go. Yeah.
Maybe. We're just starting. Let's see. We have 24 years of not good so results. So.
Yeah, no, but I agree. It sounds like Brazil's incredibly well placed to do these sorts of projects, and it's the sort of thing that we see as well with OpenAtlas. So we work with a lot of different enterprises who have supply chains in Brazil, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and all around the world. And it's really interesting to look at, the satellite imagery and the analysis coming out of these regions. And as a result, we're certifying or verifying a lot of projects, not dissimilar to yours as well, to see what's happening on the ground. And there is so much activity on the ground. And you would know better than me, Pedro. There seems to be a mobilization of people and resources towards these sorts of projects. And it's really encouraging. Again, I see it from a satellite image 100,000 feet in the air, but I'm sure you get to walk in these projects a little bit more closely than I do.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
yes, well,
I would like to highlight, Flavia, if I may, sorry, a little bit more of that kind of Latin American Europe conversation or element, right? So I was born in Venezuela, and I have spent much of my professional career building this business here in Europe, and clearly that brings me kind of the connection between these two ecosystems to me is something of that I feel very connected to it, right? And I think, Pedro, you mentioned that, Harry, you as well, like from the element of what Latin America, South America, Brazil in particular brings to the table: land, biodiversity, this untapped potential for renewable feedstocks, and where you have Europe, a market that has a huge demand, it has that regulatory push, and it has had at least, was pioneering the sustainability standards that were being kind of then taken on by the rest of the world as well, right? So I think the Acelen Renewables project is one example of how these things come together, right? And the impact that some of this collaboration can have. And the EU-Mercosur agreement, again, it has its gray areas, it has its pros and cons, but it could be a major accelerator for this type of value chain. That is something that we urgently need for both of these ecosystems to prosper, right? And both of these markets to grow. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you, Juan. I think very valid point to share as well. Harry, I mean, you at the beginning you explained a little bit about OpenAtlas, and we are always, everyone here is understanding that the need, of to sustainable projects move ahead. We need and to be implemented at a scale, at least at an industrial level, all that we need to guarantee this impact on degraded land, or environment can be monitored, measured at somehow, and of course, back it up or demonstrate it, right? But with credibility, of course. So how, considering OpenAtlas view and experience, how does, how this intersection of the satellite intelligence, land use, visibility, and sustainability decision make, you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I find really cool about what I get to do is we're dealing with as you say, scale at the biggest scale I think that we know, right? Planetary scale. And to echo what Juan was saying, this idea that we have European markets, we have different geographies that feed into those markets. But at the end of the day, something that I'm struck by when I'm looking at this satellite imagery is that these are different markets, different geographies, but we're all, and in some cases, different ecosystems. But it really, as airy-fairy as it sounds, it is one planet. And how all of these things flow together, what happens in one country crosses another border, both in terms of trade and export and production, but also in kind of like the environmental effects of those things as well. So to build on that, so what we do is we look at these humongous supply chains, right? We're talking hundreds of thousands of different unique locations. These can be coffee suppliers in Colombia. These can be cacao suppliers. They can be palm oil suppliers somewhere else. They can be leather cattle suppliers from Brazil or anything like this. These are huge supply chains that are all feeding into different products around the world. And a part of the challenge that we've found when we work with enterprises is that they want to do the right thing, right? So many, if you're a procurement specialist and you've got a decision to make to onboard a new supplier or 1,000 new suppliers for a new product line or something like this, you want to be able to pick the one that is cost effective, of course, but also is having a positive impact on the environment. And the type of evidence that we provide at scale for these organizations and these teams is to say, all right, we can analyze these different sourcing locations around the world. We can do it 10,000 in 10 minutes. We can have a look at them and we can tell you not just if there has been deforestation there in the last 5 or 10 years or 20 years or anything like this, but we can also tell you, is this location exposed to climatic risk? Looking forward into the future, we can make predictions about the future as well. Is there, risk exposure to floods, fire? I'm Australian, we have a lot of floods and fires, but you can also begin to see the characteristics that suggest that these types of things will be more likely in the future. And when we work with enterprise teams, so often when they're making decisions between different suppliers, in the past, they've been limited by just making a decision based on what is the cheapest, who's the cheapest. It's the only data point that I really have to deal with. And now what we're doing is we're saying, all right, we can also tell you, what's the environmental impact of this plot of land versus another plot of land? What is the risk that this plot of land will renege on its contract in year 2 or 3 because it's exposed to flood, fire, or other kind of forced labor conditions as well? All of these different characteristics that we can see via this huge amount of satellite imagery. And effectively what we're doing is we're providing these teams, these organizations who want to do the right thing, and I will tell you have an economic imperative to do the right thing, because usually that quote unquote cheapest supplier has a lot of hidden risk in those contracts as well. I think everyone who's ever dealt with anything will probably tell you, you get what you pay for in many cases. And if you're only looking at the cost, you're going to get something that's, a supplier is maybe overestimating what they're capable of producing. Maybe they're in the floodplain that is very likely will be flooded in year 2 or 3 of a contract. All of these different considerations, we can provide that information now at scale to businesses, to stakeholders, to decision makers, and they can make better decisions, both for the nature, for environments, for local communities, but also for their own bottom line as well. And I think, if there's one thing that we're trying to perhaps get through today, I think, speaking to Juan often, meeting Pedro here as well, there's this confluence of these different factors such that if you pay attention to your environmental bottom line, it will benefit also your business's financial bottom line as well. And being able to do that not just on a project by project or supplier by supplier basis, but automate that everywhere all at once is a new capability that thankfully we all have access to with the technology that exists today. And I think the technologies of tomorrow are even more exciting in what they're going to facilitate as well. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hopefully that speaks to how we try to deal with this huge scale, which is planet Earth, and provide information around the answers to those questions at the scale of planet Earth as well.
Yeah, it's made clear that sustainability relies a lot on data quality, right?
Yeah.
And basically we're talking about trusting here, and not from different angles, right? So I don't know if Juan and Pedro also wants to comment on that. I know it was a very specific question around intersection, satellite, but maybe you can talk about this dependence on quality data, or I don't know.
Flavia, I always have something to say.
Yeah, I know that.
But no, I think
I have more questions for you, Juan. Don't worry.
No, but to perhaps emphasize again, Harry, you mentioned something that I think has been a recurrent and continues to be a recurrent mistake by some industry leaders, and is ignoring the hidden cost of climate disruption or climate risk, right? So again, if you're looking at things just from the price label and you're not looking at the full picture, particularly in the world that we live in today, that is a huge risk that no business that works on a global supply chain can possibly afford, right? And then, of course, again, looking at it from where we come from with digital traceability, I think where OpenAtlas and Finboot have worked well over the past, I think, going on 2 years or perhaps over 2 years now, Harry, is the fact that satellite intelligence brings us that visibility and that kind of data that perhaps we've been missing in our traceability journeys if we didn't have that point of observation, let's say from the skies, because ultimately it is locations that are impractical or potentially costly to reach, and it gives us an opportunity to say, actually, we unlock the value and the evidence and the quality of that data, as Flavia was saying, to bring together that full picture of the value chain.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just quickly on the back of that. I think an anecdote that makes a lot of sense here is this idea that 100 years ago, businesses had perhaps warehouses all around the world or even in their own cities, and they couldn't, either the technology didn't exist, or if it did exist, maybe 50 years ago or something, to put remote video cameras in there and have some visibility into what's going on there. It was either it didn't exist or it was too expensive. Nowadays, if you think of Amazon not having eyes on its production facilities, I'm in Berlin at the moment. If they haven't got a video camera or 100 video cameras in their warehouses here, then that's a huge risk across a number of different factors. And I really do think that same trend line of having more visibility and insight into the risk of your not just local production facilities, but into your suppliers around the world is just going to become the norm in time as well. And Flavia, you said this point around data, standardization, interoperability. I think the really cool thing here is increasingly organizations like Finboot and OpenAtlas, we integrate together so these capabilities are at your fingertips without having to onboard all of these different tools to get there as well. So I think the world is moving towards more technology and also kind of increase interoperability of that technology as well, such that the benefits for businesses are more at their fingertips than they've ever been.
And maybe let me highlight the importance of tools like those ones that you've mentioned, that Finboot, OpenAtlas, and others in the market. It really, on a business perspective, on a player like us, those tools and they're very important, and they really allowed us to take decisions better with more data, and really understanding the hidden risks and hidden costs associated with the decisions that, as you said, maybe in the past 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, in the past, we didn't have that option. We would take decisions without that full visibility. But now I think that was an important shift in the market, like tools such as the OpenAtlas and Finboot allow us really to build business more solid and really build the trust with investors, suppliers, and consumers that, okay, we are selling somehow, like we are selling with like with the molecule SAF, for instance, that we're selling a sustainability aspect associated to that. And with tools like OpenAtlas and Finboot, the consumers, investors, they can really be assured that those aspects, they are there, and it's not something that doesn't exist and someone is claiming. So it's really important for the business, definitely.
Yeah,
Sure. I think
absolutely.
we have spoken, about restoring land, some scaling, these new industries and managing sustainability. But still, there's the questions, the pink elephant in the room, that how do we know, right? And we mentioned that technology can support this, and I would like to dive in on one technology that I think, how do we know where materials came from, how emissions are calculated, or even if this whether sustainability claims are trusted or not. And I think we can maybe Juan jump in on the part of digital traceability, right? We talk how this sustainability is evolving from regulatory, but more to bring business capability. Sorry. So I would like to know how you describe that traceability as infrastructure can really help these companies scale their circular products or lower carbon materials and even renewable fuels, such the Acelen projects.
Yeah, no, I think exactly that's very much ultimately at the core of what we do, right? Is these digital traceability solutions that help us gather the data across these industrial ecosystems and connect them to each other, right? So if we look at the work with Acelen, it's understanding, okay, what's the input that is being used in these farms, right? So what are we putting in terms of fertilizers, water consumption, the information and the evidence tied to the land use change, right? So how we're restoring this land use change, and all of the then emissions implications that has and will have effectively in the sustainable fuels that we're going to produce, right? We do this in other industries, in automotive, where we're again demonstrating circularity of automotive components, in aluminum and in steel, being able to demonstrate a reduction on product carbon footprint, being able to demonstrate the decarbonized production of these ecosystems by, again, tracing the sources of energy that industrial manufacturing sites are using, right? And it's all about connecting all of these data points to the assets that we're placing in the market, right? The products that we're ultimately going to place in the market and say, well, this product has all of these sustainability credentials, and here's the evidence and the full audit-proof data trail that has, right? And I think the biggest disconnect, or maybe the thing that I struggle with the most in a way, is that when people hear traceability, at least historically, they've often think of compliance, right, and regulatory. And what we are kind of making it our purpose to show businesses and to demonstrate to businesses is that that's too narrow a vision, right? So, and the way we should look at traceability is as an overall infrastructure, in this case, a digital infrastructure, but for our businesses, right? So just like no one could fathom run the finances of their organization without digital systems in place, no one could imagine running the sales and marketing processes without a CRM in place. Traceability systems are becoming that same infrastructure for sustainability, for supply chains, and for industrial competitiveness, right? Because in that element of SAF, right, and one of the things that I like to highlight the most around Acelen project, Pedro, is the fact that, again, we like to go out and say that, hey, not all SAF is equal, right? And what Acelen is doing is, okay, yes, I'm going to put SAF in the market, SAF as an asset category will fit the demands that the regulatory mandates are putting in place. But the fact that with traceability and with everything else that you guys are doing in that value chain, we can actually demonstrate, okay, this doesn't just fit the demand of what you're doing. Look at all of the additional value that this particular SAF brings to the table and what makes us different, right? And that's how we like to kind of use that as in, let's leverage these digital technologies to enhance or improve our competitiveness in the market, right? By being able to back up and make claims that we can back up with data that others simply could not do it because they don't have the same processes or the same businesses that you guys do, right?
Yeah, bringing this credibility. And you mentioned, and you speak directly to Pedro, so I would like to bring Pedro into this conversation. He mentioned already the importance of the technologies for companies like Acelen itself, but I would like also to know Pedro's perspective on how important is transparency supporting, future market access for SAF, for example, and bring all this conversation around credibility, Pedro.
No, I mean, look, transparency and having a reliable system and governance and process and tools that really is able to demonstrate and prove all the aspects that are claimed associated with the SAF, with the final product that we are developing. As you said, like starting with the beginning, okay, like we are using degraded land, and we can prove that, and there is a reliable tool, satellite image history that is used to prove that land was degraded and was kind of abandoned, let's put it that way, before we started producing that. A reliable tool and transparency that we were doing. We tracked all our operations and emissions since the plantation to the final product. That is key. Without that, we don't have business, and that is simple as that. So it is in the core of the solution. Again, I keep saying that SAF, we don't sell only the fuel, the energy content in the fuel, but we sell it with the sustainability aspects associated with that, either the carbon emissions, the degraded land recovery. So we can only do that with tools, technology, data, to really reliable ones. We really can prove that and can build and maintain the trust of our investors and consumers and players in the market. So it's in the core. Without that, we don't have business. We can just shut down the light and go home.
Yeah, definitely bring trust to the table is important. We are heading to basically today. I have at least like maybe 15 or minutes. So I would like to look ahead now. We are entering a decade defined by the energy transition, resource constraints. We mentioned this already, climate commitment as well. And this all have been rapidly evolved, right? And creating more sustainability demands, expectations, all that. So I would like to know from our panelists their expectations looking to the future, right? So what is one thing that you hope you have changed in the industry when you talk about investing in nature and the impact to business competitiveness? Who wants to be first? Not all the time, not everyone at the same time, please.
I'm happy to jump in first. I think just keeping in tune with that message of the EU Green Week and of this event today on investing in nature. I guess my hope is that kind of investment in nature and nature restoration becomes the norm as a productive asset, right? So we've of course always thought of nature as an asset, but it's always been as an extractive approach, right? And And then the fact that, hey, restoration and investing in nature restoration can also be a productive asset. Today we have some examples of that, and again, they're growing, they're starting, but I hope that becomes the norm over the next couple of years.
I think Juan, Harry, maybe you want to jump in this one as well?
Yeah, I was trying to put the words together in my head,
It's
but
kind of the difficult questions because we need to,
But I'll
ahead.
put the words together out of my mouth instead. I was thinking this idea that environmental, my hope or my expectation for the future, and it definitely feels like where the trend is going, is that environmental risk will be it's not, won't be perceived as this thing that is purely EU Green Week or this, that, or sustainability of like the 2010s or something. But rather that it's kind of dealt with and engaged with by businesses, but also everyone in the same way as we deal with the other risk that's fundamental to businesses, be it kind of like financial risk, governance risk, or everything else. Because I really see these as developing in the same direction, which is what in some respects may still even seem onerous today in financial markets or something like this, but the sort of compliance obligations that we have around those, the regulations that we have around those, we accept them for what they are because we understand that the benefit of having them is better than not having them, from both kind of like a risk perspective, but also the damage that can be done, not just to the financial bottom line, but also to the environment as well. So if we can start to think about risk in that kind of holistic sense, instead of thinking about, governance risk, financial risk, all of this stuff over here, and then sustainability risk is something separate, but as one kind of unified effort, I think that's both the direction that we're going and sort of my expectation for the future as well.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks a lot. Pedro, do you want to share your vision about the future on this?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think like the big challenge for the next decade is really moving from announcements to execution. We have done we have secured this $1.5 billion to start building the plant, and that's how the industry needs to move, and really like how to do that. Really, I think like companies should begin their sustainability journey with data. Again, a sustainability claim without data and transparency is just a claim. A sustainability claim with data and a reliable tool and system, it is an attribute. So really start like thinking from the start on their data, digital tools. It will really unlock financing, market access, and regulatory readiness for the companies and business.
Thanks, Pedro. I think there's one question here from the audience, and it's directed to you. I think you mentioned this a little bit in your answer now, but maybe we can expand. There's a question here saying, looking ahead to the next decade, what would most accelerate the global expansion of renewable fuels? You think would be technology, public policy, financing, or international collaboration, Pedro?
I think like in the renewable fuels arena, I think there are two things that we need to think to really accelerate and scale that up. Is the harmonization of regulation. Really, Europe has done an amazing job setting up the rules and the mandates and really sticking to that. But as the world start moving in that direction, then you start having regulations in US, in Singapore, at CORSIA level, which is more like an international level, and they are kind of different. So which brings a lot of complexity in a global supply chain such as sustainable aviation fuel. So the harmonization of regulations will really reduce the burden for business to really scale that up. I think that is the main point for really scale up and reduce the burden of new business and really consumers as well. As an airline that operates in Europe, United States, and has international flights, and also in Brazil you have how many types of sustainable aviation fuel I'll need to buy and manage to comply with the different regulations. So that's really something that
and as Juan said, right? No, all fuels are the same. So
exactly.
definitely. Pedro, Harry, you would say something? Sorry, did I interrupt you?
I was just agreeing. I like the statement. Not all fuels are the same.
Okay, perfect. I do have other questions here on the comment section. So if you have more questions, feel free to pop up them. I will read them. So there's one here that I think is for Juan. Juan, they are asking about what are the key factors for scaling projects like Acelen Renewables. Do you think about the key factors?
Well, but for scaling them, I will let Pedro answer that perhaps, because I think it would be a better place to give that insight.
So sorry, I didn't get the question.
The key factors for scaling projects like.
Yeah, no, I mean the key factors to scaling a project that is a large capital project. So you need a lot of investment. So the key factor to continue like scaling projects like that is first like securing the demand. If there is no demand, of course there is no market. So on that sense, I think Europe and other countries are doing a great job to really like setting up the demand and really positioning that the demand is here, is there for the short term, for the medium term, for the longer term. That is the main point that gives confidence for investors to really do those investments on that scale, 1.5, 2 billion, $3 billion in investment. That's one side. And again, as demand is driven by regulation, this whole thing about harmonizing the regulation, it's really other thing that would facilitate new projects coming in.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to that, Pedro, is the certainty element that you introduced, right? So I think Europe has done a great job on creating the basis for that growing demand, but we need to be very careful and very conscious of why regulatory certainty is important and to guarantee the success of these projects, right? So derailing some of the efforts around European sustainability regulation, it's a big risk, because then it puts in risk some of these huge investments that are done because of these markets that we are creating, right? So I think that would be kind of the message to Brussels, if you will, in saying that we got to keep track and maintain that regulatory certainty, because it's securing investment and it's securing the investments in the industry, the decarbonized industry that we want for the future, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Harry, do you want to add anything from the land governance perspective or in monitoring risks side?
I mean, certainty is good for business everywhere. So I think that would be good no matter where you are and what you're doing. Being able to at least have a sense of what the future will hold, I think is obviously beneficial as well. I think that the work and like regulations are a funny thing, right? Because on one hand, we're up here saying that there is this return on investment that is obvious to anyone that's engaged in these projects. On another hand, we still require governments to kind of push people towards it at this current stage. And I think, that in many senses is what the role of regulation is to kind of see where the benefit is and to put up some guardrails to get not just kind of the front runners there, but to bring a lot of the rest of the market along as well. And if that is going to actualize realistically in the nearer term, then I think, yeah, of course, regulatory kind of consistency and clarity is the most important thing there. And I'm sure everyone who's on the call today would probably attest to a degree of that. It's really hard to make kind of the longer term predictions and plans about the future if there's not clarity around that. And I think that that will probably get us to somewhere where we need to be, especially considering that the challenges that we're dealing with or trying to face here, be they environmental, be they financial for businesses, these are not short, this isn't 1 quarter initiatives. These things require the kind of pulling together huge amounts of capital, huge amounts of resources, huge amounts of energy over a good period of time to really reap those benefits. So yeah, echoing Juan's sentiment there that regulatory clarity, while necessary today, we would hope is also consistent into tomorrow.
Sure, I think the conversation from today makes clear that nature is not a simple environmental issue. Investing in nature is not, simply nature environmental issue, but it's become an economic, industrial, and also a strategic issue, right?
Yeah.
And everyone needs to be looking at it. We have discussed land restoration, sustainability fields, transparency, using digital traceability solutions to do so, and more important, the importance of credible data, right? Sustainability data. And before going to our final moment here, and I would like to for you, each of you, share your final thoughts, right? Maybe we could try to give the audience a major challenge for the next, decade, maybe describe an opportunity that you see, and most important, I think, a practical recommendation for how companies can navigate the whole sustainability transformation. So Harry, because you are the last one, so if you don't mind, I would ask you to keep.
Yeah. Something that has been on my mind during this conversation and also earlier today is this idea that investing in nature through transparent industrial value chains is not just it's not just an environmental decision, but increasingly what we can see is it's a security decision as well, right? I think the situation in which is hopefully de-escalating at the moment, but in Iran and the impact that that's had on global supply chains and oil prices and everything around that, it has proven that if we keep our mindset on what has been working for the last 100 years, it is both not necessarily very good for the planet, very good for the financial bottom line, but also from a security perspective, it isn't the smartest option as well. And I think we need only look at that as an example for how all of these factors are interlocked together, right? Security meets financial bottom lines, meets benefits for the environment, which means that you can actually swim at your local beach or pool or whatever because it's not terribly polluted or something like this. And all of these things together, we look at them in isolation, but they really are the same thing. And the best metric that we have for this is kind of just the economic metric. And I think that as a metric is kind of increasingly showing that investing in nature through transparent industrial value chains is economically, socially, and environmentally viable more now than ever as well. And from a security perspective and everything else. So that's just something that has been on my mind a lot, so I'm just going to say it now as a closing word. Hopefully it's relevant. Yeah.
I mean, I think from the major challenge that we are living now is also one of the main opportunities that we can explore, right? But what it needs to be changed is the mindset. We need, if I can give a practical recommendations, is that, I mean, we need to change how we view that in order to be benefit by these opportunities. Juan, do you want to share your?
No, I think, look, I want to, of course, thank Pedro and Harry for joining us in this conversation. I'm aligned with that message of investing in nature as a lever for industrial competitiveness. And if anything, the recommendation would be to, hey, start building your capabilities now, particularly around traceability. And if you have questions on how to do that, just get in touch with me and I'll help you out. But again, thank you guys for being part of this conversation today.
Pedro, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
I would like to thanks for the invitation to participate in that panel, and I feel honored here to be here on that conversation, discussion with Juan and Harry. Definitely, I leave that meeting smarter than I got in, and really also inviting the ones that are watching us to getting to Acelen Renewables website, learn a little bit more about the project, and also learn more about Finboot and OpenAtlas. That those are like fantastic solutions that really can enhance and accelerate any business development with traceability, with reliable solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm also sharing on the screen the URL, the web page of Acelen Renewables, and also now I'm going to share OpenAtlas for those who want to reach out. So thank you, Pedro, Harry, and Juan, for sharing all your insights today. Also, thank for everyone that joined us. And they already said that, but if you want to keep up the conversation, feel free to reach out to all of us, and see you on the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.